So you've all been enjoying our videos and you're liking what you see, but some of you have been asking, you want to see more of the team. You want to know a bit more about the team who works for me at Clearance Grafters and Vintage of Surrey. So we're better off to start than Kev. Kev's been working for me in the clearance side for about a year, and there's a lot more to Kev than first meets the eye. He owns a museum, and not just any museum, a military museum. Today we're going to meet Kev, find out a little bit more about him, and hear some of the stories that the museum holds. So stay tuned for this one. So Kev founded the Wings Museum about 20 years ago with his father and his brother. And since then, they've accumulated an incredible amount of items belonging to World War I and II. And Kev's going to show us around today and tell us some of the stories about where the items have come from and what purpose they had during the war.
Hi, I'm Kev. I'm co-founder of the Wings Museum here at Balcombe in Sussex, and I've been interested in aircraft since a very young age, and several things that kind of helped to develop that interest. When I was a boy, I was always taken with my father to the air displays at Biggin Hill in Kent, which kind of captured my imagination. I did a project at school when I was 7 on the Spitfire, and as a boy, like many boys of my age at the time, I made Airfix models and kits and things like that. But what really got me started on the road to collecting was that we've got relatives that live in East Anglia. We used to go and stay with them over at Easter, and my cousins in the 1970s had one of the first C-scope metal detectors, and we took for a walk over one of the old 8th Air Force American airfields, and the first thing we found was a crosshair, a gun sight from a Browning machine gun. That really captured my imagination, and actually that part is here in the museum on display. That really formed the basis of the whole museum. From there, obviously my brother and my father were both interested as well, and we kind of collected. Some would say it was a hobby that got out of hand. Started off by having stuff under the bed, and when that got filled up, it was cupboards and then sheds and then garages, until we have what you see here today. Of course, it's all very well collecting things as a collector, but when you collect items, you also collect stories of people, of what they did, and those things are important and they need to be shown to the public. That's what the philosophy of the museum is. We're very much about the people and the stories behind the items. So one of our exhibits here is a Hawker Hurricane, a British aircraft. This particular one, when it was a bit war-weary, was sent to Russia on Lend-Lease. That's, for those that don't know, this is what a Hurricane looks like. It's built by Hawkers, and so this one would have had an RAF history before it went to Russia, but it ended up being shot down on the Russian front by German aircraft. And what was interesting when we acquired this is that down here, I don't know if you can see this, just here, that is a hole with a piece of shrapnel from whatever shot it down, where that had embedded itself in the main wing spar of the aircraft. So that travelled all the way from Russia with that embedded in it, and made it to the museum here, and probably what brought it down. So being interested in the stories of people, one day a lady came along and she had a small group of memorabilia from her father, and she wanted to donate it to the museum. We gladly accepted it. And it turned out that her father was in the RAF in World War II. He was shot down in 1940 in enemy occupied territory. He was very badly wounded in the leg, and the Germans they took him to hospital and they tried to save his leg, but they couldn't, and they had to amputate it. So after a brief period of recovery, they gave him an artificial leg, which was no more than a wooden stump, and they sent him off to a prisoner of war camp. He found that wooden leg that they gave him so uncomfortable that he began studying what he could do to improve things. And he ended up just with things that he could find, he could beg, steal or borrow from the prison guards. He ended up making himself a new artificial limb and learning to walk on it. And that was so successful that he went on to do that for at least 12 others, people who were in similar circumstances to him in prisoner of war camps, just from things that he could find. That to me is quite an amazing story. He didn't get any particular recognition for that. He didn't get any special medals or anything like that, but his items are very special, I think. This is a C-47 Dakota, and it was used in World War II. It's an American-designed aircraft, used extensively, but also for drop-in paratroopers. This is an original aircraft that has combat history, but people will probably know it better because it was once owned by Steven Spielberg, who used it for filming a series called Band of Brothers. And if I take you along, basically this was used for all of the internal shots, not the flying sequences obviously, but all of the shots where they're inside. And we normally have the clip that they filmed in this aircraft playing at the same time. It's going to be quite dark. It's just... So both sides would have been lined with seats like at the front there, and each one of those depressions is where the parachute pack went, where they sat down. They would basically, when they're over the drop zone, the lights at the back near the door would be on red when it's not time to jump, and obviously they'd go to green when it was safe to jump. This is an actual type of parachute that they used. That's a real one. You can only imagine what it must have been like to be in one of these, flying over enemy territory, being shot at, knowing that you're about to jump into the middle of the combat. So the museum acquired this long after Steven Spielberg had finished with it, obviously. But whilst it's been in the museum ownership, it did go away to Pinewood Studios and was used for James Bond film Quantum of Solace, if anybody's seen that one. They did some filming using this in that film as well. It's been used in several documentaries, and also it's had several smaller, less well-known filming things. So it's quite a film veteran now. About 20 years ago now, I suppose, we were researching, we'd heard about a crash of an American photographic reconnaissance P-38 Lightning. And it had come down near Swindon, very near to the M4 motorway. And we weren't sure whether, of course, it was under the motorway or the motorway had been constructed over the crash site. Anyway, one thing and another, we couldn't find that particular aircraft, but we did find another one from the same squadron that had crashed. And we looked at the official crash report, and although the pilot had been killed because he bailed out and his parachute didn't have time to open, his aircraft had come down in a field. And the Americans had done a report after the crash, and they'd put it down to pilot error. Now, the pilot was last heard on the radio to say that his cockpit was filled with fumes and that he asked them for a heading to steer back to base. They gave him a heading, and he radioed back and said, "It's all clear now. I'm on my way back." That's the last thing they ever heard of him. His aircraft came down in a field near Swindon. The crash report said pilot error. They couldn't find any evidence of a fire, so they just thought that he must have been mistaken. Now, one of the things that we found when we were carrying out the excavation is the front nose wheel leg at the top was very badly burned. Now, in a photographic P-38 Lightning, all the cameras are in the front. They don't have any guns. It's all camera equipment, and the old acetate film that they used to use was highly flammable. So what we think, an electrical short circuit had caused a fire in the nose. That was right in front of his cockpit, so it might have filled with fumes, and he might have become overcome with those fumes. But we have got the evidence that it wasn't pilot error. It was a genuine problem that he had, and we have been in contact with the family in the States, and we have been able to sort of tell them that and show them the evidence. So that's quite a nice little thing to correct after all that time.
Hi, I'm Harrison. I have been working for Luke for 3 years now, with 1 year in the clearance side and then 3 years in the shop side. So I do Saturdays in the shop, and then I do come out on clearances during the week. And I got interested in history when I was really quite young from horrible histories, and I used to read the comics when I was about in junior school or about year two. I used to start reading them, and I've always been fascinated by militaria. But then I got into metal detecting. I saw it online. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. And honestly, it's amazing because you're the first person to see something in thousands of years. Because I dug up a bit of mid-late Bronze Age gold, so I was the first person to see that and like hold it in probably, I think, 2,000 years-ish. And it was absolutely just amazing to think about. But yeah, common clearance is amazing. We see so many different lives of people. We see so many different places. We've seen amazing things come out of clearances.
Now, this is a Link trainer. It's possibly the world's first ever flight simulator. Basically, a pilot would climb in there. It was really designed to teach pilots to fly at night or in cloud, where they had no reference to the outside at all, and hence the reason why you have this hood that comes over and it's completely dark in there. They've got no reference to the horizon at all, and the pilot sat in there, and everything was mechanically operated from bellows using compressed air. So when the pilot turned right, the thing tilted over to the right. But although we haven't got the part, it was also linked to a desk with a map on it that the instructor could see, and it had a thing called a crab that actually moved along and followed what the pilot was doing on the desk, so the instructor could see what he was doing. But so many pilots were being lost because they were disorientated when they went into cloud or at night, because all they could see is their instruments, and the brain starts playing tricks on you and doubting those instruments, that they needed to teach people to rely on those instruments. And that's what this was for. So being a museum, which is also a registered charity, everybody here is a volunteer. No one is paid, and we are very lucky to have an excellent group of volunteers who run the museum when I'm not here, so I don't need to be here all the time. Obviously I'd like to be, but you know, there's mortgages and bills to pay and things like that, like everybody else. So there's lots of opportunities here for volunteering. If anybody is watching this and feels that they have the time or would want to volunteer, there's front of house, what we call front of house volunteer opportunities. Or we do lots of restoration here of aircraft parts and exhibits, and there's always opportunities to get involved with those. So if anybody's interested in volunteering, we're open 6 days a week. The only day we're not open is Monday, so we're open Tuesday to Sunday. That's most of the year except for Christmas, when we close very briefly.
So here we have a air shelter commonly found in London and surrounding areas. And this is a prime example of what they would have been, what you would have built in your back garden. So that's what they would have been. You can see how small that is as well. And Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Imagine being there, bombs going off around you. It's incomprehensible.
Working with Luke now for about a year with Clearance Grafters, and yeah, I really enjoy the work. I've always been interested in militaria and also just general history and older things, and going along to some of these clearances we find sort of lots of antiques and old things, and it's really interesting. And I think it's also helpful for me to be able to help identify some of the militaria items, particularly World War II related, that we do occasionally come across. And another part of what I'm interested in is of course old tools, mostly like woodworking tools and things like that. So I have a knowledge of that kind of thing as well, which perhaps I bring to the team.
Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It just gives you a bit of an insight into Kev from the clearance team, and of course, as I said, there's more than meets the eye with Kev, and there's so much more to explore with him. But for now, we'll leave it there. It just shows you that we are not your typical and your usual clearance company. There is far more than you see it goes on in the background, and our team are so knowledgeable, so we're able to assist in such a thorough way when we're doing the clearances and so on. But if you do want to go and see Kev and his museum, it's the Wings Museum. I'll put all the details up in the description. Head over there and see him. Check out his amazing collection of items. But for now, as always, thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Thanks for watching, guys.